Hi, it's Huart here. I hope you're doing marvelously well. So as ever, please subscribe. Go to producelikeapro.com, sign up for the email list, and you'll get a whole bunch of free goodies, samples, free sessions to mix, some free videos, all kinds of fun stuff. But most importantly, you'll get this files for this song. Now, what this is David Mood, a good friend of ours who's done several videos before. And if you're already a subscriber, you'll know that David is a Studio One user. So what he's been doing is taking some of our more popular videos that were done in Pro Tools and then applying to Studio One. This one's better than that still. He has taken a song which I mixed, Robert John and the Rex, Good Loving. He's taken that and he's mixed it in Studio One, but he's also taken another concept I did in a previous video talking about using saturation plugins, distortion plugins. The thing about saturation plugins, which is wonderful, is you can get a louder perceived signal and reduce the dynamic range, but make it feel really, really thick and powerful. So the great thing about saturation is it controls the transients. It folds those transients nicely in. It makes the signal feel fatter, warmer, all kinds of stuff. But I love using saturation. It's an amazing tool to keep the signal nice and loud and fat in the mix. Also, to be quite honest, it helps glue things together for me. There's lots of reasons to try it, lots of reasons to use it. So in this video, he's taken a song that we've already mixed using Pro Tools as our DAW. He's mixing it in Studio One, but he's also taking saturation plugins and helping that mix get glued together and bringing a lot of energy. So check it out. Don't forget to download the files. You can download the session and you can have a lot of fun with this one.
Hi everyone, it's David Mood here from Produce Like a Pro. Today I'd like to show you a certain way of using saturation and distortion plugins. Now sometimes it can be a little bit difficult to work with this kind of plugins because many of them tend to raise the volume of a track quite considerably, so that this can become an issue, especially if you're already in the final stage of your mix and you balanced out everything nicely. Then you throw in a couple of saturation plugins and many times you need to rebalance everything to get it where it was before. Now, I'd like to show you a solution for this which makes it a lot easier to work with this kind of plugins. Now, I will be using Studio One here, and I will also demonstrate a few Studio One specific things, but the basic method I'd like to show is applicable to any DAW so that you can try it out in the DAW of your choice. Okay, so let's get started.
Okay, so let's see what we've got here. This song is called Good Lovin' by Robert John and the Rex, and it's a fantastic song with great arrangement and production. It was a lot of fun to mix it. The multi-tracks for this song are available at Produce Like a Pro Academy, so if you're a member you can download them and mix it, and if you're not a member yet, there is a 14-day trial available. Okay, so I would like to demonstrate this technique I was talking about with the saturation plugin on a vocal track and a bass track. But first, I will play you guys the first verse and the first chorus, just that you can hear what we're working with here.
Got me a woman who treats me right, goes to work in the morning, gives me loving at night. I've got me a bunny, she's sweeter than honey. She don't want no silver, she don't take my money. She don't take my money. She gives me good loving. Good loving. She gives me good loving. Good loving. My baby don't mind.
Alright, so just in case you're wondering why there are so few tracks here, that's because I have most of them in folders and subfolders. Like here I've got the kicks, the snares, and the drums are in one big folder. Same with the guitars. They're just all hidden from sight, so I don't have to scroll to all of these. So let's open the mixer and go to the lead vocals track. And as you can see, I have here as the last plugin in my FX chain the Softtube saturation knob inserted to give the vocals just a little bit of saturation and edge and to help them cut through the mix better. Now this is a free plugin, and in the beginning it was only free for Studio One, but in the meantime Softube released it for free for all major DAWs, so you can get this for free on their homepage. It's a great sounding plugin, but it's a little bit limited, partly because it's free, I guess. So you see it has no other controls really than the saturation knob itself and control for the type of saturation, but it has no controls for the input volume, for the output volume, or anything else. So this can become a little problematic when using these on everyday work. And same is true for other saturation plugins as well, which are similar to this, because they raise the volume of the tracks quite considerably. Now, of course, some volume rise is inherent to saturation and distortion, because as you add overtones and saturation, you raise also the RMS level of a signal. So it's normal that it gets louder, but it not only gets louder by this amount, but the whole signal level gets louder as well. This is especially problematic if you're already at the final stage of your mix and then you decide to add maybe one more plugin here or there, but your balances are already set, and then you need to rebalance everything because you added this plugin. So let me show this problem. Let's solo the lead vocals and loop the first verse.
Got me a woman who treats me right. Goes to work in
Let's
the
start at
morning,
0
gives me loving at night.
and turn this up.
Got me a bunny, she's sweeter than honey. She don't want no silver, she don't take my money.
Now you can hear that the volume gets louder quite drastically. Let me bypass it and then turn it on.
Got me a woman who treats me right. Goes to work in the morning, gives me.
So this is a bit of a problem. Maybe if you're using this plugin already, then you did in the past what I did, maybe to insert a mix tool after it, where as you can see I lowered the volume. Now this is a bit of a hassle, and it's not so easy to balance out the two plugins so that the volume stays consistent if you bypass and unbypass it and so on. I'm sure you know this problem, and again, as I said, it's true for other plugins as well. So I was thinking about the solution, how one could use such plugins, maybe in an easier way. And what I found is a free plugin, again, by a company called Blue Cat Audio, and it's simply called Blue Cat Gain. It's available for free on their homepage at bluecataudio.com in all major formats for all DAWs. And just go to Products, Freeware, and you will find the Blue Cat Gain suite. So if you download this plugin, let's open the browser. It comes in 3 different versions, one mono and one stereo version, and one called dual, where you can manipulate the left and the right side of a stereo signal independently and even do some mid-side processing, but I will not go into detail into this now here. I will just focus on the stereo plugin, because I will just use always the stereo plugin, even if it's going on a mono track like I have here with the vocals. You can use a stereo plugin without any problems, at least in Studio One, on a mono track. There are no disadvantages, but of course if you happen to insert a mono plugin on a stereo track, then you're making the track mono, which is not very good. So let me remove the mix tool here, and instead I will insert one instance of this gain plugin before the saturation knob. Then if you click on this little icon here on the top of the window, then it will always stay open. So let me also open the saturation knob. Let's keep it open as well. And now I will also open a second instance of the Blue Cat Gain plugin after the saturation knob and keep it opened as well. So we have the signal flow now going from left to right. So the signal is going into this first gain plugin, then into the saturation knob, and then to this second instance of the Blue Cat Gain plugin. Now this might look like a very simple gain plugin at first glance, but it has really some special tricks up its sleeve, and you can see them if you see here under the gain knob. We have a field here saying not connected. If we click on this, then some groups appear, and we can assign this, let's say, group A, and then we go to the second instance, also click here and assign this knob also to the group A. Now what happens that these two plugins get linked automatically, and whatever I do with the first instance of the plugin, You can see the second one does the same. So if I raise the gain, both raise at the same amounts. If I decrease it, again, the same happens. By the way, I'm using the mouse wheel to control this knob. So it has kind of step control. So if you just move the mouse wheel once, then it moves in 1 dB increments. And you can hold on Shift and then use the mouse wheel to move it in fine 1/10 of a decibel increments. Well, this is very nice. So, but here comes the really interesting part for our purpose. If we click here on under link options on reverse for the second plugin, which is after the soft tube knob, then if you increase the gain at the first plugin, then after it at the second instance, you can see it gets decreased by the same amount. And if you decrease it on the first, then it gets increased in the second. So the main idea is here that we, instead of using the saturation knob itself to control the amount of saturation, we're driving the signal level into the saturation plugin and then decreasing the output with the second instance by the same amount so that we can have a consistent volume. So I will put the gain knob of the saturation plugin somewhere around here. I know that's a good starting point because after you go past 12 o'clock, then the distortion gets really extreme. So the really usable ranges of this plugin are usually somewhere between 9 o'clock and 1 or 2 o'clock. So that's a good starting point. So let's see what we got. Let's loop our verse again. And as you can hear, the vocal is already quite heavily distorted. So I might even decrease the gain here and demonstrate you how it is if I increase it. You can hear the volume stays consistent nicely and we're just changing the saturation amount. Now if you go into extreme levels of distortion, then actually the volume drops, but this is caused by the soft tube plugin itself. I think they might have created some compensation, but only at the extreme stages. So have a listen.
I've got me a bunny, she's sweeter than honey. She don't want no silver.
You can hear we are losing a lot of volume here, but again, this is due to the saturation plugin itself. But if you're staying in the usable ranges, like probably from -10 dB to 10 dB, then the volume is really consistent. And that really enables us to work with it much easier. Now, one other problem is that if you would now insert this configuration onto a track, it would get louder immediately because our saturation knob is turned up. And there is a way to solve this. I have made some tests with a tone generator and an analyzer. And I found out that at this setting of the saturation knob, we need to decrease the output gain by -5.8 dB to get the exact same signal level as without the plugins. And the great thing with this Blue Cat Gain plugin is, if you disconnect the second plugin now temporarily for our group by just hitting this X here, you can see it's not connected now. Now we can dial in -5.8 dB and then connect it again to the same group as the first one, group A. And if we now change the gain here, then you can see it will keep this offset of 5.8 dB wherever I turn the knob. So once you set it up like this, then it will always stay consistent in volume. Of course, this setting very much depends on the position of the saturation knob. So I have it here at 3.5. If you put it to a different value, then you would have to check it out how much gain you need to decrease at the second plugin. Okay, so let's find a setting which works nicely for this track. I will loop the chorus because the singer is singing the loudest there. So I'm not a too big fan of audible distortion on vocals, even in a rock song like this, but I like to have it a little bit saturated on the loudest notes the singer sings. So I want to hear the saturation when he's hitting the loudest notes, but not hear any distortion when he's singing softly. So let's check it out in the chorus.
Good loving.
That's already a little bit too much for me, so in this case I will decrease the gain here.
Good loving. My baby.
Now this sounds fine to me. Maybe it's still a little bit too much if you listen in solo, but of course we will not let it soloed, but instead listen to the whole mix. And this sounds fine to me. Let's listen to the verse.
Got me a woman who treats me right. Goes to work in the morning, gives me loving at night.
And the chorus. Okay, so I'm happy with this setting for this track. So everything I have showed you until now, you can recreate easily in any DAW, but now I'd like to show a few Studio One specific things. Now, of course, it would be kind of a pain to always have to load 3 plugins, but now we can store this whole configuration as an effects chain preset. Now to do that, I will insert or copy all these plugins to an empty track, because if I would save the preset now, then all of these other plugins on the track would get saved as well. So let me just copy them over to an empty track. Actually, we don't need to see it. So this is just for the purpose of saving. Then I will put the first one to 0, so that when we insert it, of course, we start here at 0 and here again at -5.8, which will give us the consistent volume. But before I actually save this as a preset, we can do a lot of practical things which will help us a lot in Studio One. Firstly, we can rename these plugins so that we know what is what. I will call this first insert input gain, and the second instance, you guessed it, output gain. And then let's actually open all 3 plugins again, because I'd like to show you something. So if we open the macro controls with this button here, the macro controls are controls which you can use to map or link any parameter of any plugins on the track to these controls, so that you can control them from this interface without having to open the plugins themselves. And this will of course come very handy with such a plugin configuration where the 3 plugins work together. So we have 8 knobs and 8 buttons, and even some pads here, which we will not use now. If you click here on the wrench icon, then we can see here the 3 plugins. So all you need to do is open here this folder, and you can see the available parameters. So I will link the first knob to the gain. You just have to drag it here. Then the second macro knob I will link with the saturation knob itself. The third knob I will link with the saturation type. And we don't need to link anything of the output gain, because this is working anyway automatically. But I will do one more thing. I will assign a function to the first macro button, which lets us bypass all 3 plugins at once for easy A/B comparisons. Now here is a bypass all function, but I will not use this, because this will turn off all plugins which are on the track, and I want to just control these 3 plugins. We can also assign several parameters to just one knob, so I will do this here. I will take the bypass function of the first plugin and pull it on this knob. Then the bypass function of the saturation knob, put it on the same place, and also of the last plugin, I will put it here. So now we have the bypass of all 3 plugins together on this one button, and I will rename this to bypass all, so that we know what this is. You can just double click here and rename them. For instance, here I can also rename this to input gain. And now if we close this again with the wrench icon, you can see we have assigned these parameters to this page. So we can control the input gain, we can control the saturation knob itself if we need to add more or less saturation, and also the saturation type we can control from here. And most importantly, we have the bypass all function. So let me zero this out again. And now it is time to save this whole thing as a preset. For this, we just need to click on this little arrow and say store effects chain. We already have in Studio One a red light distortion, so I will call this blue saturation. I think this will create a nice contrast, and just hit OK for now. Remove the chain here by clicking remove all. And also I will remove all my lead vocals. this chain we already created, because now we will insert instead the completely new FX chain we had here. So if we go here on top to the FX chains, then you can see we have a new one here called blue saturation. So if we drag this and drop it here on the vocals track, then we have everything correctly assigned, correctly named, and set up just like we had it before. So let me show you that it's true what I'm saying. Let's open the macro page. You can see we have everything correctly assigned. Now I think we had it at -4 dB, so let's put it there. You can see we have still the offset. Let's have a listen.
Treats me right, goes to work in the morning, gives me loving at night. I've got me a bunny, she's sweeter than
Now I
honey.
demonstrate you the bypass function which we created.
Don't take my money.
Bypassed. You can see all three plugins get bypassed at once. Affected.
I've got me a bunny, she's sweeter than honey.
Bypassed.
She don't want no silver, she don't
On.
take my money.
So you can see the volume is really very consistent, and this makes it so much easier to work with the saturation knob and any other kind of similar plugins. Needless to say, this is not limited to the saturation knob. You can try all your saturation distortions plugins with this method. You can use the same preset and simply, drag the other plugin on the place of the saturation knob, then it gets replaced in the middle. And you just need to find a new offset, which was here specific to the saturation knob. Now, are there any disadvantages to this method? Well, one obvious one is that you have 3 plugins on a track instead of just one. But at least in Studio One, that's not a problem, because here we have unlimited number of inserts. But it could be an issue in other DAWs where the number of insert is limited. As far as the CPU usage goes, it's really basically non-existent. If I open up the performance monitor, you can see here on the top we have the most CPU intensive plugins, and I have to scroll all the way down to the bottom, and here you have the output gain, input gain, which are the Blue Kit gain plugins. So the CPU usage is completely negligible. Okay, as promised, let me show you the same method also on the bass. Let me solo it and play it. And let's open the routing page. Now this looks like a shitload of plugins here, and it kinda is, but you see I'm using them here in a parallel configuration. So I'm doing parallel processing, because such plugins like the saturation knob can actually damage your low end or take away from your low end, and that's certainly not what you want for a bass guitar. So inserted a splitter here, so I have one signal path which is without distortion and one where I inserted the saturation knob. Let's play it again. I boosted it here by 4 dB into the bass. And then we also have again the same offset, so that the gain gets attenuated. And after all this chain, I'm using an EQ to cut off the low end, to not mess up the low end of the other audio path. I'm using the linear phase mode of the Pro EQ for that, to not get any phase issues. And then finally, I'm compressing just this distorted part to make it cut even a little bit more. So I can bypass this whole chain here by clicking here. So this is without distortion. With it. And this is just a distorted part. And together in the mix.
I need a woman who treats me right, goes to work in the morning, gives me loving at night.
Bypass.
Got me a bunny, she's sweeter than honey. She don't want no silver, she
On.
don't take my money. Got me a woman who treats me right. Go
Bypassed. With them on. Okay, that's it for the individual tracks. Now, one thing that's very important, if you are using several instance of this plugin chain in one song, then you need to make sure, let me open the plugin from the vocals track and the input gain plugin from the bass track. You need to make sure to connect them to different groups. As you can see, I have this on group A and the other one on group B. Otherwise, if you forget this, and believe me, it's very easy to forget, then you would control, if you want to adjust something on a vocals track, you would at the same time adjust it on the bass track and vice versa, which is of course not what you want. So in order to avoid this, what I have done, I have here in my folder under effects chains, I have created actually 3 different presets called blue saturation. And the only difference between them is, let me insert one here. The only difference is that they are already assigned to different groups. So they have it in their name. This is assigned to group C, the other one to B, the other one to A. This also reminds me that if I'm using more than just one FX chain in one song, that I need a different group. So this certainly helps not to forget it, and it's also preset. And yeah, if you need more, then you can insert the same, and then before you do anything, assign it to a different group, and then you can adjust them individually. One other application for this is, for example, if you're using console emulation plugins, which typically one puts on all tracks or at least on all buses. So I probably wouldn't use the saturation up for this, but just for demonstration purposes, if you select several tracks, then you can drag and drop a plugin there and they get inserted on all. If you assign them all to the same group, then you can control, of course, the saturation for your whole song, but on a track-to-track basis. And what's even cooler, that you can, let's say you want to have on one track a different amount of saturation than on the others, then you can disconnect it temporarily from the group, set your offset, which you want, like let's say you want here less, and then reconnect it to a group, and then you can still control all of the plugins with just one instance, but you will keep this offset between the different instances. Okay, let me remove all of this. This is a new feature in Studio One. If you select the tracks you want and click on Remove All, then now all of the plugins gets removed on all of the selected tracks. This is a very new feature, which is also very handy. Okay, let me finally show you another application where this method is really helpful, and that would be to use these Blue Cat Gain plugins with limiters. Well, some limiters, like the Tone Boosters Barricade I'm using here as the last plugin on my master bus, some of them have a unity gain on monitor function like this one here that allows you to crank up the input gain and the output gain gets automatically decreased so that you don't get fooled by volume increase, which of course very easily can deceive all of us. But of course many limiters don't have this function. Also, for example, the limiter which is included with Studio One. So let me remove this, and I already created a preset for this which is called Bloom Limiter. By now you know what this means. And if I insert it here, let me open again our complete signal chain and the output gain. You can see here, of course, I have no offset between the two. They are both at 0 dB. And I have assigned them to the last group, which is group I. That makes sure that if I'm using other instances of the gain plugin, they very likely will be one of the other groups and not group I. So what we're doing here is the same principle. We're driving the gain. Instead of cranking up the input of the limiter itself, we're driving the gain inside the limiter, keeping the input at 0 dB, and then decreasing for the volume change. And so we can focus really on just what the limiter is doing to the audio signal, and we are not deceived by an increase in loudness. So let's go to the last chorus, which is the loudest one. And I also open this macro page where I again assigned the most important parameters, so I don't have to all the plugins opened for being to control. So I have the input gain, which is again the first gain plugin. I have the ceiling of the limiter, which of course controls the maximum output level. And on the knobs, I have again a bypass all function, which bypasses all 3 plugins for A/B comparisons. I have a knob called bypass output, which bypasses only the last plugin Even though this is also illuminated here, it really only bypasses this one, as you can see. Because of course, once you're done with the setup and you have it like you want, you need to bypass the last plugin because you want the increase in loudness. You just don't want it for setting up the limiter. Or of course, you can, to be safe, completely delete this last plugin from the chain after you're finished with everything. Okay, so let's play the last chorus. And maybe not only the bass. And now let's slowly increase the gain with the first Blue Cat plugin. And you can watch the gain reduction meter here on the limiter. Right now I boosted 3 dB and you can see basically it does nothing yet. It's not working yet because we haven't reached 0 dB full scale yet. So let's add some more gain. Now at 4 dB it's starting to do something, but it's really not much. So let's give it a hefty boost. Now you can clearly hear the limiter pumping. Let's make it extreme. And you can also hear how easily we can completely destroy our song by abusing the limiter. So let's go back to more sane levels. Somewhere around here. Seems fine. I'm taking off just a little bit of the peaks. And now, of course, if we click on bypass output, let's play it again, then you will hear the increase in loudness. So I'm bypassing now all. And engaging a limiter. Okay, one last thing, I also mapped here the true peak function of the limiter to this button to turn it off and on, which stands for intersample limiting. You only need this if you're using the limiter as I'm doing it here as the last plugin on the master bus. Otherwise, if you're using it just on individual tracks in the mix, then you can turn this off. Okay, that's it for now.
Alright, I hope you found this approach useful. As I've said, it's not limited to saturation plugins. You could try it out, for example, with compressors, which have a fixed threshold where you drive the gain into the compressor, like an 1176, for example. You could try it out with guitar amp simulations, or maybe you have an idea which I haven't thought of. If that is the case, please make sure to leave a comment under the video and let me know. Also, if you have any other comments or questions, please leave a message under the video. Okay, thank you very much for watching. I've been David. Bye-bye.
Great, so I hope you enjoyed the video. I think David did a wonderful job. As ever, please subscribe. Go to producelikeapro.com, sign up for the email list, and of course, try out the 14-day free trial. And don't forget, you can download these files. Have a marvelous time recording and mixing.